There's only one option, boyo. I gotta get in shape before me next date. And you're gonna help.
Hello, SpongeBob fans. Ready for a new dose of SpongeBob content? Number 1, the Krusty Slammer. In this episode from Season 12, Plankton thinks about one new plan to take the Krusty Krab down. For this episode, he tries to vandalize his rival restaurant to ruin Mr. Krabs' reputation. But after some problems with the police of Bikini Bottom, his plan completely backfires and he gets locked up after Krabs turns the Krusty Krab into a fearsome jail. Poor Plankton. It seems like he would never be able to gain control of the secret formula. As funny as it sounds, we don't want to spoil you on the whole plot of the episode, so let's jump to some animation errors.
Now everyone in town will know what a jerk Krabs is. Yeah!
Man, you think you know a guy. Gotta be true.
We've seen some strange moments in SpongeBob SquarePants, but let's take a look at this one. Here, right at the beginning of the episode, we see that Plankton is throwing red paint at the Krusty Krab and making some funny paintings to laugh at Mr. Krabs. This act of vandalism was punished afterwards, but it also came with some animation errors. If you take a look at the floor, we see that it's flooded with red paint. The cool thing is that even if the floor is painted, when the camera zooms in and out of Plankton, we see that in some frames the paint puddles on the floor disappear. What a way to start the episode. Let's move into other errors.
It's mine! It's mine! I saw it first! The perfect escape.
We're pretty familiar with some members of the cast losing their body parts, but this time, Plankton fell victim to that. In this scene, we see that Plankton is trying to run away from Mr. Krabs' claws and exit the Krusty Krab office. At the end of the scene, we see that when Plankton is close to the door, parts of his feet are cut off the screen. This happens a couple more times during this scene, so be aware because you might find some errors that we didn't. Number 2, perfect chemistry. What would you do if two of the best minds in Bikini Bottom joined forces to create an awesome teleportation device? This episode presents us with a very strange combination between two very unlikely allies. At the start of the episode, we see that Sandy and SpongeBob are working on a new teleportation device. This caught Plankton's attention as he was also working on some new devices to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula. All of this ended up with Plankton trying to combine his invention with Sandy's so they could create the ultimate teletransporting machine. Seems like a cool episode, right? We strongly recommend that you watch it. And now let's watch some animation errors.
I guess I never realized you were such a student of science. Maybe you could help me fix my nut transporter.
Huh? Did you say transporter?
Someone forgot his water helmet in this episode. Plankton might have decided to work with Sandy during this fantastic adventure, but do you notice something strange happening in this episode? Usually, when characters travel to Sandy's tree to visit her, we see that they wear a protective glass helmet so they can breathe underwater. But Plankton defies all laws and decides to not wear any protection. This is cool because wearing that helmet is a mainstay in SpongeBob's lore. But we know that Plankton is a very special guy.
Yes! It's working at last! New lab partner!
Oh, I guess you won't be needing me anymore.
Well, this might not be the first time that we take a look at SpongeBob's inner organs, but something strange happens in this episode when we look at that. Do you know what it is? If you're not a SpongeBob loyalist, you might not have noticed that every time we look into SpongeBob's inner body, the body has holes, which makes sense since he is a sponge. But in this episode, that completely changes and SpongeBob's body doesn't have any holes. Such weird errors in such a funny episode. Number 3, Bad Guy Club for Villains. Are you ready for some superhero action? Like in many other cartoon shows, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy also had some special episodes, and, well, Patrick and SpongeBob were watching a lost episode in this adventure. This time, Bikini Bottom's greatest heroes discover that there's a villainous group with the worst villains of the depths of our favorite city. Will our heroes be able to defeat them? Watch this episode and find that out. Now let's see which errors we discovered. While SpongeBob and Patrick are watching Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy beating some evil villains on TV, our protagonist can't stop their happiness watching their favorite heroes win. In the moment that they lift their hands to celebrate, SpongeBob loses his eyelashes in the midst of the emotion. Relax, SpongeBob.
That's why Neptune gave us the rewind button.
Thank you, Neptune!
Both SpongeBob and Patrick seem to love this episode, right? In the ending scene from the episode, we see that Patrick gets scared of the ending credits, which leads to SpongeBob rewinding the tape so they can watch it again. The funny thing is that instead of hitting the rewind button, SpongeBob rewinds the tape by pressing the exit button. This is a very small and strange error, but we shouldn't forget about those. Number 4, Pat No Pay. Patrick might be SpongeBob's best friend, but that doesn't exclude him from paying the debts that he has with other characters from the show. In this case, Patrick has to start working at the Krusty Krab because after eating too much, he owes Mr. Krabs some money. Will he be a great co-worker for SpongeBob? Find that out in this episode.
Methinks of paying customers in our midst. Patrick, how's a Krabby Patty with extra cheese sound? Gimme! Not yet!
From one character losing lashes to another one changing them. Mr. Krabs is a very special character, and this scene represents that very clearly. While he is talking to Patrick and SpongeBob and giving our favorite star some Krabby Patties, we see that his eyelashes change their color to a greenish tone for one frame. This one was a hard one, right?
So, Patrick, how are you? What in blazes did you do?
Seems like SpongeBob animators don't like facial hair. In this scene, we see that Patrick is sitting on the ground after eating a lot of ice cream, but something strange is happening to his face. Because if you look at him closely, you will see that he is missing his right eyebrow. Patrick can't catch a break during this episode. Number 5, Goo Goo Gas. Another episode, another Plankton failed plan to steal the secret formula. This time, his evil mind created a funny new way to annoy Mr. Krabs by turning him into a baby with a special gas created by himself. Obviously, and like many other plans, things didn't go as Plankton planned, but we recommend watching this masterpiece of an episode.
He's a little bigger than I imagined. Whoa! No! No! Ow! Ow! Ow!
Do you know how many K's the keys of the Krusty Krab have? Well, if you're not a true and long-time SpongeBob fan, you might not have noticed this, but much like we saw before in the video, there's a strange thing happening to one key component of the episode. Usually, when Mr. Krabs shows the keys to the Krusty Krab, they have 2-letter K's on them, but in this episode, they only have 1. What a cool thing to discover.
You geezers, release me!
Right after the party, the pinata party.
What? Thanks for calling us old!
As we told you before, transforming everyone into babies didn't go as Plankton planned. But after some incredible things happen, we see that everyone is now super old, and Plankton has been caught trying to steal a Krabby Patty. The funny thing is that even if he's caught in a net, we see that the net is hanging, but there's nothing that he could be hanging from. What cool nonsense. Did you know that it has some animation errors? Well, here we are to show you some of them. Number 1, the scent of money. Well, even Gary took part in some of Mr. Krabs' schemes to gain ever more money. In this episode from the 7th season of the show, Mr. Krabs discovers that Gary has a special talent for finding money in the streets and in hidden places. And as you know, if Mr. Krabs finds a new way of getting more money, he for sure will exploit it. He goes as far as telling SpongeBob to paint the Krusty Krab with a toothbrush so he can have Gary doing his bidding for a longer time. We recommend you watch this episode if you like cool stories, but now let's see if we found any animation errors.
What are you doing out here?
Oh, you know, unwinding, enjoying the free parking.
SpongeBob was having a quiet and delightful day going for a walk with his beloved pet snail Gary until Mr. Krabs decided to show up. But what's the strange thing happening in this scene? Well, when SpongeBob suddenly encounters Mr. Krabs in the parking lot right before he discovers Gary's power to find money, they start talking for a brief moment. It's in this same moment where we find the first animation error because SpongeBob's eyelashes disappear for a brief frame. We're no strangers to these kinds of errors, but they are always worth noticing.
You look fine to me. Quit being such a baby and start making me some money. Excuse me, excuse me!
For sure, Mr. Krabs is a real evildoer when it comes to gaining more and more money. In this scene, we see that not only is he hiding in the bathroom, but Mr. Krabs has dressed as an old woman just to hide from SpongeBob and steal more of Gary's time. But we see that he doesn't take care of Gary properly, and this makes him a victim of an animation error. In this scene where Mr. Krabs is hiding Gary right under his old woman's dress, we found a very small and fast error only found by the most expert eyes. If you look at Gary's shell when Mr. Krabs is hiding him, there's a brief moment in which his shell loses all its details and becomes plain colored. You might need to re-watch this scene before finding this mistake because it's lightning fast. Number 2. Tentacle vision. SpongeBob might be the main protagonist of this show, but have you ever imagined how a show would be if Squidward was its main character? Well, get ready to discover it in this episode. After finding out that some TV shows were getting canceled and finding out that Bikini Bottom's TV was giving shows to anyone, Squidward tries to get out of SpongeBob's shadow by creating Squidward Chat, a TV show in which Bikini Bottom's most famous squid is the protagonist. This creates a very funny episode with some interesting twists inside Squidward's TV show. That's why we don't want to spoil you any details and directly recommend that you watch and enjoy it by yourselves. Now let's move on to some errors.
All of the most intelligent programming starts before 5 a.m.
What's the first thing you need to watch TV? A great TV controller. At the very beginning of the episode, we see that Squidward is spending his night watching his favorite TV shows. To switch from one another, he uses a very special controller that will be the protagonist of the first animation error that we've found here. In this long scene inside Squidward's living room, we see that he uses the controller many times, but when we see the remote controller at first, it has a big and flashy red button. This is the last time that we see that button because after this scene, it disappears from the controller and it's nowhere to be seen. What a curious way to start the episode.
As I was saying, today on Squidward Chat, we'll be discussing...
So I ran to tell Squidward that he was on TV, and he told me that I was on TV.
Well, great TV shows always have an awesome supporting cast for their protagonists, right? In this scene, SpongeBob invades Squidward's set and appears on live TV, only to make Squidward angry and tell him to leave his house. Right after SpongeBob leaves, we see Squidward back on TV, and in that moment, the wrinkles on his forehead completely disappear. Poor Squidward, he needs to control his anger. Number 3, mooncation. Who doesn't want a trip to the moon? Sandy and SpongeBob have a really good friendship, and in this episode they celebrate that by making an incredible trip to the moon. During their time on the moon, they learn to moonboard, or skateboarding on the moon. They drive some space rockets, and they even go to Mars on their next trip. We highly recommend this episode because it's a very fun experience to watch. But now, let's forget about spoilers and move into some animation errors.
Nothing like extreme sports and zero gravity. All right, your turn.
Oh, gee, I don't know, Sandy. It looks kind of scary.
Well, it seems like the moon's gravity has affected SpongeBob in some ways. In this scene, we can see that SpongeBob and Sandy are having a brief but friendly chat when something strange happens to SpongeBob's eyes. This is a super fast and hard animation error to find, but if you looked at SpongeBob while he was talking, there's a brief moment in which he blinks his eyes for a second, but his eyelashes don't move and remain on top of his face. For sure, this has to be the moon's fault.
Well, we are gonna make it, aren't we, Sandy?
If the fuel holds out, there's no reason to panic.
Sandy's rocket is a very special vehicle to travel inside. Our protagonists might be on a crashing course during this scene, but there's a small animation error ready to be discovered. If you look closely at the fuel gauge, there's an error on the gauge screen. When the fuel is about to be finished, the color shown in the screen is blue instead of red. What a funny episode! Number 4, for here or to go. Who would have thought that Mr. Krabs wouldn't give a free patty to anyone? Even worse if that burger is for Plankton. In this episode, Plankton wins a free Krabby Patty in the annual Bun Seed Counting Contest. This, of course, creates a new episode in the rivalry of Bikini Bottom's biggest businessmen in the fast food sector with a really funny and curious ending. We'll leave you all the pleasure of discovering the exciting moments that this episode includes, but we're not going to forget about the animation errors. So let's watch them.
Needs to clean the grill first.
I cleaned it this morning.
Doesn't your spatula need a line in or something?
Nope, she's perfectly aligned.
SpongeBob experts, we call you. This scene has one of the hardest animation errors that we've ever found, so get ready to find it. Here, when Mr. Krabs is talking to SpongeBob, we found something strange happening to Mr. Krabs' eyes, because if you look closely, there's a frame in which Krabs' pupils disappear from his eyes. Such a great way to start with this episode.
Mr. Krabs, Plankton was right.
Yes! I now command you to give Mr. Plankton his prize.
Call an ambulance. SpongeBob is losing some body parts. Here we see that SpongeBob splits in half while talking to Plankton. But if that wasn't bad enough for him, he's the victim of an animation error. If you look carefully at both of his body halves, SpongeBob's arms disappear at the same moment that he splits in two. These are some hard errors to find. Number 5, Sweet and Sour Squid. This show has some of the weirdest friendships ever created, and this episode is the best example of it. In this fantastic adventure, Plankton elaborates a fantastic plan to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula, and that is to gain Squidward's confidence and become his best friend. This weird friendship left us with so many funny moments that we are sure you'll love to discover, so just enjoy the show.
It came up and kicked you in the face!
Hey, that happened to Patrick once, too. Hey,
None of you know a great musician when you hear him!
Now let's jump into some animation errors. The Krusty Krab is missing some crucial parts in this scene. SpongeBob experts might have noticed what is going on in this scene, but in case you didn't, when Squidward is running away from the Krusty Krab, his own workplace disappears. How's Mr. Krabs going to make any money if there's no cash register?
In fact, thanks to you, I'm going to quit my job at the Krusty Krab and become a full-time musician.
We've already seen way too many accidents in this video. Sandy might be a great scientist, but she is no stranger to risking her life in extreme adventures. But in this scene, something strange happens to her and her helicopter. When Sandy's falling down after her helicopter is destroyed, a small part of the helicopter's rotor blade is cut off at the end of the screen. What a cool episode. Get ready to find it, because here are 7 animation errors that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1, Christmas. Who? Who doesn't like a good old Christmas special? SpongeBob decided to spread a lot of Christmas love and joy during this episode, but like we always say, everything that shines is not always going to be gold. So let's take a look at this part. I'm pretty sure that you haven't seen this one. When SpongeBob is running to Sandy's house to show her some of his new karate moves, there's a small frame where SpongeBob's helmet separates from his head. He's lucky that it's only for a moment because he needs it to breathe inside Sandy's house. But let's move on with the episode, shall we?
SpongeBob, I ripped my paper. Could I have another one?
Sure, buddy. Here you go. Okie dokie, Squidward.
SpongeBob? Thanks.
Did you take a look at SpongeBob's feet? When he's talking to Squidward and Patrick on the table, his shoes are transparent for a few frames. Such a funny error to discover in this Christmas special. Number 2, the secret box. What would you do if your best friend had a secret box that nobody knows what's inside it? Will you try to discover it? Enter here, the secret box. It's in this episode where SpongeBob tries to discover what is inside Patrick's secret box. But of course, it comes with its fair share of errors during this process. We know that the trio of Squidward, Patrick, and SpongeBob are the most famous neighbors of Bikini Bottom, right? When SpongeBob tries to infiltrate Patrick's house at night, Squidward's house is nowhere to be seen. We know that Squidward isn't the happiest person around, but they erased his whole existence this time. But let's take another look at a very small error that we were also able to find. Here, when SpongeBob is arguing with Patrick, he has double the freckles he usually does. Well, this is a small error, but an error nonetheless.
Is the most secrety secret in all of secretdom, and I am its sole witness. It's a heavy burden, SpongeBob, but nobody must know the mystery of the box. Nobody!
Number 3, salty sponge. Seems like SpongeBob wanted to change restaurants for a while. In this episode, SpongeBob starts working at the Salty Spittoon instead of working in the Krusty Krab. But let's see what this change of scenery brings up. Right in the beginning of the episode, we see that the mailbox outside of Bob's house is missing. But if we look just a couple moments later, the mailbox is right where it should be. But this is not the only thing that is missing in this episode. At the start of this adventure, after SpongeBob goes to the Krusty Krab and cries over it being closed, the camera starts to zoom away from the restaurant and the chum bucket is nowhere to be seen. Many things disappeared in this episode. Number 4, Friendiversary. Friendship is a very important aspect of everyone's lives, right? Well, for sure, we know that Squidward and SpongeBob are the best of friends. Let's watch this clip of the episode Friendiversary.
It's all here in my Squidward memory book.
What?
Here's us at camp. Here's when I moved in right next door. Oh, and here's when I got Employee of the Month instead of you again.
Did you catch the error? There's a moment at the start of the episode where, while SpongeBob is talking to Squidward, his neck disconnects with his body. What a strange way to celebrate their friendship. Well, this is not the only error we've found in the episode. Let's take a look at this. Squidward's and Bob's friendship goes as far as sharing the same inside of their houses. For sure, friendship is a pretty thing. Number 5. Hot Crossed Nuts. Krabby Patties might be the Krusty Krab's stellar dish, but in the episode Hot Crossed Nuts, Sandy creates a snack that drives people even crazier than the Krabby Patties. Let's check it out. Well, if you looked carefully enough when Sandy and SpongeBob were giving this fantastic meal to Squidward, suddenly SpongeBob's arms turned into Squidward's arm. This is weird because Squidward is the one who should be outside. Maybe dinner is not the only thing that changes in this episode. Number 6. Sir Urchin and Snail Fail. We might think of SpongeBob SquarePants as a legendary show for us, but have you ever thought about what SpongeBob watches on TV? Let's take a look at Season 13's Sir Urchin and Snail Fail.
It's no joke, Patrick. Our favorite comedy team just broke up on live TV.
And now that we've introduced you to this fantastic show inside SpongeBob's world, let's take a look at the scene of the episode. If you look closely at Patrick's shorts at the beginning of the scene, the super characteristic flowers that we can usually see in his pants disappear for a second while he's sitting on the sofa. Maybe it was just too fast that you need a second look, but for sure, that was a funny animation error. Number 7. A mini Squidward? Squidward brought to life one of the most famous moments in SpongeBob's history, with Squidward doing his particular dance. But this is not the only thing we found while revisiting this episode. Let's take a look. In this episode, SpongeBob decides to strengthen his friendship with Squidward by making a mini version of himself. This mini squid will be the protagonist of many funny adventures during this episode, because he is able to do everything that Squidward does, but even better. But even though this mini Squidward looks super cool, he is accompanied by some animation errors. Let's check this iconic moment from the episode. While this demonstration of skill by mini Squidward is impressive, I hope that you looked at SpongeBob because we found something funny in his attire. When SpongeBob is holding his new little friend in the air while he's playing the clarinet, part of his t-shirt is yellow, much like his real skin. We know that wardrobe errors are a common theme of SpongeBob's animation errors, but like you can see, even the best episodes have their own flaws. Anyway, let's enjoy the episode. So get ready, because here we have some animation errors that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Number 1. Squilliam returns. Do you know who Squilliam is? Well, Squidward's main rival made a big appearance on this episode, and of course to make Squidward's life really annoying. First appearing in the episode Band Geeks, Squilliam is represented as a rich and triumphant version of Squidward, but in this episode, he came here with one mission and only one: confronting Squidward about his newly discovered 5-star restaurant. Let's take a look.
We're all ready to be dazzled by your 5-star restaurant. Wait, Squilliam, I've got to explain. It's a 5-star restaurant.
Funny, right? Squidward doesn't seem to know how to run away from trouble. But what we're here for is to find some funny and special animation errors. So, what we've found here? Soon you'll know. If you looked at this scene slowly enough, you might have discovered that something strange is happening while Squilliam visits Squidward's restaurant. Just take a second look and see if you are able to find something. Well, in case you haven't seen anything, when Squilliam arrives at Squidward's 5-star restaurant, it's sunset, but when he's starting to eat his meal, suddenly it's nighttime. This is weird, right? This might surprise you, but this is not the only strange thing that you can find in this scene. Because when Squidward says, "Would you get out of here?" the sky seems to be in the daytime. For sure, day eyes have a different rhythm in Bikini Bottom. Nonetheless, to camouflage this error, the animators decided to reduce the brightness of the exterior so it's more nightly suited. But this is not the only funny thing we found here. Let's take another look at another funny scene.
The horrible, sad truth is, I'm a cashier too.
Well, this scene might only be for die-hard fans only, but look at Mr. Krabs' eyes. If you've seen the show for a long time, you'll have noticed that Mr. Krabs' eyes change color for a brief moment during this scene. Usually they have a very characteristic pale green color, but during this scene they're completely white. Such a funny detail to find. Number 2, House of Fancy. Seems like our last episode wasn't the only one with Squilliam causing trouble. In contrast with the last episode, Squidward didn't try to pretend that he had a luxurious restaurant in this one because he tried to prepare his house for a TV show. At the start of the episode, Squidward is watching the famous TV show House Fancy, a TV program that encourages inhabitants of Bikini Bottom to show their houses and show everyone who has the fanciest ones. But like usually happens to our favorite octopus, Squidward's day is ruined when he hears that the program's first guest is none other than Squilliam Fancyson. Another time that Squidward has to face his worst enemy. After some chaotic events and funny adventures, Squidward ends up with his house destroyed, but winning the trophy of House Fancy Prince of the Year. Like people always say, you have to make big sacrifices to reach big goals. But we have found some strange scenes that we wanted to show you to see if you're able to find some errors.
Hey, Nicky dear. Well, toodaloo, Squidward. Enjoy the program.
Squidward looked like he was having a peaceful time this morning, enjoying a great cup of tea. And that's exactly what we have to take a look at, the cup of tea. At the beginning of the scene, we see that Squidward sets his teacup down to answer the telephone. Much to his surprise, he's shocked to learn that Squilliam is on House Fancy. When the camera zooms out to Squidward, we see that again he has the same cup of tea that he left on the table before. For sure, he wasn't the happiest person ever to hear from Squilliam, but this is a really funny scene to discover. But this is not the only error we found on this over-the-top episode, so let's continue watching.
This may take a while. Just sit back and relax.
What the? A whirlpool bath elevator?
We know that Squilliam has a pretty big ego, right? Or at least that's what his elevator tells him. Well, if you took notice of the background, there is a small difference between the 3 pictures on the back. 2 of those have Squilliam having a very big and hairy unibrow, while the other one doesn't have it. Maybe animators confused one squid with another, or maybe they forgot about the unibrow. Number 3, that's no lady. Did you know that Patrick disguises himself as a woman to not get kicked out of Bikini Bottom? After a strange morning in Bikini Bottom, one strange guy told Patrick to get out of town after showing him a brilliant and strange briefcase. Fearing that he would be a paid assassin, Patrick thought about one very strange solution: dressing as a woman. This caught the attention of many male inhabitants of Bikini Bottom, and Patricia became a star all across our favorite underwater city. But let's look at the animation errors we found here.
I gotta get out of town!
To do something horrible to me before I'll let you throw Patrick out of town.
Patrick!
You forgot your flyer.
Get out of town.
Here we have the first interesting detail of this episode. When the businessman first shows his pamphlet about the marvelous resort he works for, the sign reads, "Get out of town to beautiful Seashores Resort." And at the end of the episode, the same pamphlet reads, "Get out of town to beautiful Sunny Shores Resort." This might be a change of that text, or maybe it's just an animation error. We will never know.
There'll be no such thing as opening too early, me boy. Excuse us, miss. Huh?
Mr. Krabs might have lost something more than his eyes in this scene. If you look closely at Mr. Krabs, when the camera gets close to him while his eyes explode, he suddenly misses his left arm. He for sure got too in love with Patricia. Number 4, drive-through. Well, it seems like Mr. Krabs has a way to make money out of everything. In the start of the episode, SpongeBob starts to fill a hole that he finds in the Krusty Krab's wall with toothpaste. This starts to make Mr. Krabs uncomfortable and decides to make a plan out of this when he sees the hole of the wall breaking. And his fabulous idea is to create a drive-through using a simple menu written on napkins and a microphone made of tin cans. This might be a great plan, but it comes with its fair share of errors. Let's take a look.
Mr. Krabs, what you doing?
Oh, hi, SpongeBob.
Did you notice something strange in the Krusty Krab? Well, we might be right at the start of the episode, but for those who've watched the show throughout its whole history, you will have noticed that the Krusty Krab is missing its trademark antenna. Such a cool detail, isn't it?
These marks don't. Hey, watch it, will ya? I just had this thing repainted.
Car accidents are always a big thing to worry about, right? Well, in this scene, when both the blue and green fishes collide with their respective cars, the green fish's arm turns orange for a second. For sure, car accidents change people, or in this case, fish. Number 5, Chum Bucket Supreme. Have you ever pictured Patrick working as an advertising director at the Chum Bucket? At the beginning of the episode, Plankton's beloved computer Karen suggests that he advertise his product. Then, being the evil mastermind he is, Plankton hangs a sign that reads, "Chum is metabolic fuel." Even if he has one of the greatest IQs in all Bikini Bottom, this slogan doesn't seem to catch up until Patrick walks nearby and changes the sign to "Chum is fum." This seems to connect with people and starts to attract them, thus making Plankton hire Patrick as his new advertising director. Such a bizarre episode. If this wasn't bizarre enough, let's look at some funny scenes from the episode.
Let's see. Q, no P, no here it is, L.
Seems like something strange was happening to the Chum Bucket while creating the sign. Have you caught it? Well, when Plankton is looking inside the box of letters to make the sign, the door of the Chum Bucket has disappeared. For sure, Plankton wanted to renew the Chum Bucket on this episode, but losing its door might be too much.
Here's your Chum Bucket Supreme. Enjoy.
Well, that fish was a pretty strange one, wasn't it? If you paid enough attention, the fish that asks for lunch had a red t-shirt. But after the camera moves and zooms back to him, his t-shirt is blue. The Chum Bucket always seems to attract weird people. Here are some funny goofs that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Pickles! Can you believe that during one episode, SpongeBob forgot how to put pickles on Krabby Patties? Well, usually the first seasons of shows have some kind of errors, and SpongeBob wasn't the only one who forgot how to do things right in this episode.
I hear square pants.
Well, we hope you noticed something strange in this scene. Maybe it sounds strange or you didn't notice, but did you look at SpongeBob's spatula? When SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab, he's wearing his awesome working hat. But in the scene in which he sees his reflection on the spatula, his hat is nowhere to be seen. Maybe the animators forgot that SpongeBob was wearing a hat in that scene, or maybe he took it off screen. Anyway, this is a funny thing to see. Also, it's very rare to see a spatula without slits, right? Well, it seems like the slits only disappear during the scene in which SpongeBob looks at the spatula, because during the rest of the episode, it is filled with them. Let's continue this episode because we found some more errors here.
I hear SquarePants is back. I'm right here, Bubble Bass.
This might be a little hard to see, but in the scene in which SpongeBob is ready to confront his nemesis during this episode, we see that something strange occurs to our protagonist while he's opening the door. If you look closely, it is possible to find that, for a brief frame, his eyes change their colors, becoming achromatic. For sure, SpongeBob got angry on this one. Remember, guys, never underestimate SpongeBob's talent in the kitchen. The paper. Have you ever played music with just a piece of paper? Well, it seems like SpongeBob is capable of anything. In this classic from the first season of the show, SpongeBob decides to make Squidward angry by using a piece of paper as his favorite toy. Well, SpongeBob's talent is so big that he even plays and composes music with that same piece of paper. Let's take a look at some scenes from the episode.
I didn't play any wrong notes.
Yeah, see, you're playing it like this. When ordinarily it goes like this.
This one is for music enthusiasts, because if you look closely at the scene in which SpongeBob is playing music with his favorite piece of paper, none of the songs and melodies that SpongeBob plays coincide with the notes that are shown. This is so goofy. Also, we found that at the beginning of the episode, both SpongeBob and Patrick's houses are missing. Let's look at one more scene before we finish this one, shall we?
Well, that's the last of it. I've given you everything but the shirt off my back.
When Squidward is telling SpongeBob that he will give him everything he has in exchange for the paper, SpongeBob's teeth turn yellow for a second. Such a funny episode this was. Neptune's spatula. Do you want to have a little chat with Neptune? SpongeBob received a visit from Neptune himself in this episode from the first season of the show, and in this episode he has to demonstrate to the god of the seas itself that he has the material to become a royal cook. But let's look at some funny moments from the episode, shall we?
The light changed.
Patrick?
Hold on, almost there.
Sure is royal fry cook material. I don't suppose you have any proof.
When Patrick takes the picture of SpongeBob holding a golden spatula, he has his mouth wide open and there are clouds above him. However, when Patrick shows Neptune the picture, SpongeBob is smiling with his mouth shut and there are no clouds in the area. Another cool detail from the episode is that, depending on the scene, the color of Neptune's skin changes from frame to frame, adopting lighter tones every time he appears on screen. What a godly attire. Crabs a la mode. Do you believe that at one time Mr. Krabs turned the Krusty Krab into an ice rink? Having a plan to boycott the Krusty Krab's existence, he decides to turn off the heat in the restaurant. But being the mastermind of business that he is, Mr. Krabs always has a trick up his sleeve, and he uses this chance to transform the restaurant into an ice rink. After seeing this, Plankton puts up a sign saying that the chum bucket is warm and comfortable comfy. Everything goes south and Plankton gets very angry when he then sees the customers go back into the Krusty Krab with winter wear. Mr. Krabs has turned the restaurant into an ice rink complete with a Clamboni ride for children. And even SpongeBob has invented patty skates to help him, Squidward, and the customers keep their balance. One of the most curious things from this episode is that customers even prefer cold Krabby Patties. This is even better for Mr. Krabs because he doesn't need to cook them, costing him even less money. So let's take a look at which goofs we've found here.
Squidward, you're always going on about your book club. Read this.
Do not touch thermostat ever.
Seems like somebody forgot how to use the thermostat here. This might be a funny one to catch, but when Mr. Krabs tries to put the thermostat back to the temperature it was before, he moves it in the wrong direction. He was trying to warm the room, but instead the temperature decreased on the screen. Strange, right?
Bit sticky this morning.
Well, an icy restaurant has its cool things, but also its strange ones, right? If you pay attention to the cash register, there are some shots in which the machine is frozen and some others in which it's not. Maybe Mr. Krabs didn't think about this one. A friendly game. Ready to play some mini golf? Well, like you've seen in this episode from the 8th season of the show, SpongeBob decides to build a mini golf inside his own house. This SpongeBob guy doesn't cease to surprise us. Let's watch some cool scenes from the episode and see if we can find some goofs. Did you see what happened when SpongeBob and Patrick hit their balls into Squidward's house? For sure, bad things were supposed to happen, but when SpongeBob walks around blindfolded and destroys Squidward's things, he breaks the same window, even though the window was already broken. Bad boy SpongeBob, he got a negative note on this one for crashing Squidward's things. Did you see what happened with hole 3? Well, this third hole is a really special one because, depending on which scene from the episode you are watching, you might find that it has different obstacles. Maybe animators tried to be super original on this one, or maybe they forgot about how they initially planned things. Well, there you have it. Here's a new batch of SpongeBob Goofs and Errors that you can find in your favorite series. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments which Goofs and Errors were your favorite ones. Until the next time, goodbye!